Hey everyone, it's Tim again here. And earlier, people were bringing up the story of Gideon. Well, Gideon, it's actually kind of interesting because Gideon should have been one of the biggest stories of what God can do if you let Him. Unfortunately, when you read the whole story, it also ends up becoming one of the biggest tragedies in the Bible. Everyone knows the first part, and the angel of the Lord, which a lot of scholars do believe was Jesus Christ, a Christophany. But anyways, he shows up and says, God sees you, mighty warrior, which that's kind of interesting because you know what Gideon's doing as God says this? He's hiding. Not only that, but Gideon immediately starts arguing with God, talking about how he's from the weakest tribe and even he's the weakest in the tribe. And God tells him he's going to lead Israel out of the hands of his oppressors. And we know the story. He gives God a test. He asks God to clarify by putting a fleece out and asking for the fleece to be wet and the ground to be dry. It is. And for some odd reason, instead of trusting God, he goes, hey, one more time. Hey, just to be sure, which baffles me, but make the opposite happen. And God does. So Gideon does listen to God, and he builds an army to fight the oppressors, and God goes, this is too big. Tell anyone who doesn't want to fight or is scared they can go home. He does, and half the people leave, and God goes, that's still too big. Take them to the creek and have them drink out of the water, and ends up cutting that group in half as well. And as we know, he takes, I can't remember the exact number, sorry about that, but he takes less than a fourth of what he had, and they get clay pots, and they end up smashing them and shouting, a sword for the Lord and of Gideon. And God sends his angels down into the enemy's camp, and they all end up killing each other, and Gideon doesn't lose anyone. I wish I could tell you that was the end of the story, because a lot of Sunday school teachers will stop there, and if you're a little kid in Sunday school, that's how the story ends. However, it doesn't. He is now a mighty warrior and a judge of Israel. He is leading Israel, and during one of the fights, his brother ends up getting betrayed by two kings. Their names start with a Z. I cannot pronounce either one of them. But his brother ends up getting betrayed and killed. Gideon, in response, out of vengeance, once again, this is the main thing that catches almost everyone. It's the second one behind lust, vengeance. Gideon tracks down the kings, captures them, and not only is he going to kill them, but he hands the sword to his oldest son, and he tells him to kill them. Okay, men, as leaders, you have the biggest responsibility out of anyone. That's true. Because what you say and what you do affects your family. And there is something known as a generational curse, which is usually brought on by the father. Something they do ends up getting passed down to generation, from generation to generation. That is why a father is very important to be in the home, and what the father does and the decision he makes is incredibly important. His son refuses to kill him, so in response, out of rage, Gideon kills the two kings, even though God was actually speaking out against it. This is where things begin to fall apart. Because soon after that, Gideon is winning battles, he's prophesying, he's doing really well, and the people want to make him king of Israel. Israel doesn't have kings, they have judges. So Gideon declines it. He goes, no, I'm not right to be a king, but I will be a priest. Here's the problem. You had to be of a certain bloodline to be even qualified to be a priest. Gideon was not of that bloodline, nor did he meet any of the other qualifications. So he was not supposed to be a priest. However, he decides he's going to do things his way, and he creates a golden ephod, walks around, parades around like a peacock with it, and it says that the children of Israel hoard over it. Yes, it literally says the word hoard. But here's the thing. When you go in and you go and translate the word, it's the same word used in Hosea as he's calling Israel a harlot for worshiping the idols that were around them. So Gideon is basically having everybody worship him. Yeah, he doesn't think he's right or proper to be a king, but Gideon ended up turning himself into his own god, along with the God of Israel, trying to replace the God. We're trying to replace Hashem, the name above all names. Sorry about that, I got tongue-tied, but anyways, what also happens is, just like a lot of men today and in the Bible, Gideon falls to prey to the temptation of lust. He ends up with 71 sons, with multiple women. And not only that, but one of his sons ends up deciding that he was technically illegitimate. Sorry. But he ends up deciding he's going to be king, and he kills all the other sons. Think about this. Gideon tried to get one of his sons to kill. In response, one of his sons kills. And we also know that this son who slaughtered all the others becomes a very ruthless and brutal king. He's known for killing, and everyone hates him, and ultimately his demise comes when one of his own his own subjects drops a millstone on him. So he starts death, and death ultimately never leaves his family. So the very thing that Gideon ends up letting run free becomes his legacy, which ultimately that's why he went from being one of the greatest stories in the Bible to one of the biggest tragedies. That's all I have for this time. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.